Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. I am so excited to share this episode with you. This is a crossover episode with the ladies from the Hormone Genius Podcast, which is a fantastic podcast in a similar space as Charting Toward Intimacy. And I'm not going to introduce the lovely ladies because we do introductions on the episode itself. So let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this incredible episode today. This is a very special episode of two podcasts joining together. Jamie and I are here with a very special guest, Ellen Holloway. And of course, we are the host, Jamie and I, of the Hormone Genius Podcast. But we're doing a combined podcast with Ellen, who hosts a podcast called Charting Towards Intimacy. And this is really fun. We've never done this before. So we're going to see how this goes. We're all very passionate about the same thing. And so we want to drive home a lot of things that we're passionate about today and continue to spread the mission that women really should be empowered to be the genius of their own hormones and their feminine design. So thanks, Ellen, for being here with us today.
Yeah, this is so exciting. I've never done this before either. And yeah, so I'm just like, I love when we were talking before, we're like, so like who introduces, who talks about what, how does this even work?
Yep.
So welcome to our first ever trial at a combined episode.
Awesome. Well, Ellen, so let us introduce you, or how about you introduce yourself and then we'll introduce ourselves to your listeners and vice versa. So Ellen, will you just introduce yourself quick to the Hormone Genius Podcast listeners, and then we'll do the same.
Yeah, definitely. So like Theresa said, I am the host of Charting Toward Intimacy, and our goal on that podcast is to expand the natural family planning conversation, specifically from a Catholic perspective. Natural family planning and fertility awareness, I became so passionate about because I didn't start out my marriage with natural family planning, and I didn't really understand the benefits. I didn't understand also just like the Catholic teachings behind that. And once I started to learn about, one, how bad the pill was for me, two, how fantastic a fertility awareness is, I just fell in love. And so did my husband. And we became instructors, and then I started a podcast, and now I talk about it every week. And now it comes up in like everyday conversations with like random friends, secular or not. Like I just start jumping in. It's kind of like word vomit sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard to hold back sometimes when we're Absolutely. Thanks, Ellen, for introducing yourself. And so I'll introduce myself, and then we'll have Theresa introduce herself quick to your listeners. But I'm a fertility care practitioner with the Creighton Method, and I've been a practitioner for 8 years. I also have my own business called fiatliving.org, where we're really getting to the root cause of what may be causing hormone imbalance to support hormones naturally. And yeah, Theresa and I, we started this journey in August, basically as complete strangers, almost. We knew of each other. We've had some conversations, but it's been so fun because the goal of our podcast has not only been sharing what we know with others, the super important message, again, that women don't know or understand always because we're not told, same thing with men, but also to get to know each other for our listeners too. It's just kind of been so fun. So that's a little bit about me. I live in Iowa, husband, 3, soon to be 4 children, and just really honored and excited for this partnership here with this podcast episode. So Theresa, do you want to introduce yourself too real quick?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Theresa Kenny, and I am a women's health nurse practitioner, and I've been practicing for 20 years in Omaha, Nebraska. And I specialize as a medical consultant in NAPRO technology, which is basically just looking at women's health in a different way and trying to understand the underlying root cause of disease instead of kind of suppressing over the top of problems. So that's been a passion of mine for years, and I love doing it every day of my life. And this podcast has really come at an incredible time for me, because after you've built up 20 years of experience just listening to women honestly, just listening to their stories. You just have an incredible amount of experience of knowing where the hearts of women are. And, I just wanted to share that. And I've, had a lot of students that have followed me throughout the years, and just teaching them. I'm like, why don't I give this to more people? And a podcast right now is a great and free way to give information that you think is important. And so I'm just so excited to be able to do this. It's reaching a lot of people I know on our platform, and I'm sure on yours, Ellen. So this is a way to reach more people by combining two different podcasts together. And so thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, so fun. And I'm so excited to talk about like what we want to talk about today, which really is like, why is it that the pill is prescribed for everything? Because guess what, ladies? You're not broken. You're fertile.
And fertility is not a disease.
It is not a disease.
It's not a disease. I know. I think about that a lot. I think about how, pills and medication often are taken for things that are, not healthy with, in us, that are, I don't want to say wrong with us, but, if something is, disordered or needs support, we take a pill as medication. And so really it's interesting and kind of head scratching and mind boggling that we're taking a pill for something that actually is correct. And we're creating disorder with a system that is orderly. So we're going to really dig into this episode today, have a conversation, and really get to the root of, why is it that for so many different health issues, we're getting this one pill. And so by the end of this episode, we hope that you just ask yourself that question, like, well, why is that? Why is that?
I want to start with a story, if you guys don't mind, because this just happened, because I just love, experiences that I have in my practice. So yesterday I had is a student, and she's like, came up to me and she's like, I need you to help me with this. And she had written all this stuff on a piece of paper, and it was like the age of a person and their symptoms. And there was like all common kind of hormonal symptoms. And she had all these lab numbers written down. She's like, I just want you to help me with this. So I'm like, okay, fun, So I'm talking her through everything and talking her through what I think and what I think should be done, And then she stopped at the very end. She's like, great. Thank you so much. She's like, because this is me. And I was like, oh, I'm like, well, that's fun. I'm like, I'm so glad you didn't tell me. Cause I'm like, I probably would have thought of it differently had I known that. And she goes, I had gone to my OBGYN and I had said, I feel terrible. I feel tired all the time. I can barely get through my days. I stopped my period in July. I haven't had it since. I don't know why. I have all of these symptoms. And the doctor looked at me and said, and weight gain was one of them. She couldn't lose weight to save her life. She was eating practically nothing. And the doctor just said, well, you're premenopausal. Premenopause makes you fat. And she's like, just go on your way. And she said, the only thing I can give you is the pill. And the woman was like, well, I've never been on the pill. I don't really want to be on the pill. Why would you give me the pill? And this woman's like in her 40s. She's like, well, because some people feel better on it. I mean, she's like, no real rational medical reason for it. It's just, well, that's what I got. That's all I got for you, people. I've got two things in my pocket for you. One is a birth control pill and one's like an antidepressant. That's all I got. So she was really frustrated and she had no explanation of what the underlying lab numbers that she had drawn. And when I looked at her, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I can tell you exactly what's going on, but her doctor couldn't. Yeah. So that's the common kind of frustration that women feel when they go to an OBGYN that's not trained to kind of see the woman's body in her natural state, right? To know and understand that women's fertility, their cycle is a complex hormonal event every single month. And if you don't understand how that all works and you don't understand the intricate details of that, you also don't understand what to do with it. And that's the problem we live in.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there's just like there's just such a lack of knowledge in the world of like gynecology, which is baffling, honestly. I had heard this story of this man who was in med school, and they get to the OBGYN section of their course, and it's like, oh, if this happens, prescribe the pill. If this happens, prescribe the pill, and the litany of prescribe the pill. And he's like, he like stops and he asks the teacher, he's like, that doesn't really make sense, because like everything else has a different, prescription, like every other facet of our medical degree that we're learning, and like every other part of the body. Like, you don't prescribe for an eye infection like the same thing that you would for like a fungal infection on your toe. Like, and like he actually like saw that and realized like this doesn't really make sense. And so like, I think when we step back and look at that, it's like, okay, PCOS, prescribe the pill. Acne, prescribe the pill. Those are two completely different things.
Yeah, it's so confusing, but I really do think, and I see it, and it gives me great hope that, there are leaders rising up, whether they're medical or not, and they're saying, okay, women, like, there is another option. And so it's so beautiful to see that there is almost like this movement spreading across kind of in our culture, maybe others as well, that says like, hey, we don't actually need to put synthetic hormones into our body. And of course, we know that, we've heard it a million times. We're going to the grocery store and we're buying organic meat and cheese and milk, yet we're spoon feeding ourselves synthetic hormones, which is thousands of times more harmful in a sense than these, meat, cheese, whatevers that have the hormones in those. So anyway, what's great is I think women are starting to wake up to this. And, I think our next step is, okay, we're starting to wake up and we're starting to come up with these natural options. But because of the power frame of doctors and medical professionals, now the second step is we need to demand it. It's supply and demand. If we're not demanding it, we're not going to get it. So we might intuitively know, we might be, communicating that desire and need with our friends and sisters and community members, providing resources ourselves. But until we demand it, we will not get the supply. So I think about that a lot. We need to start really asking our doctors, because that's Theresa and I, we see this a lot. But when we do start having these conversations with doctors, many times if a doctor who's open and willing to learn, they'll explore it. And also then many times they may just go and decide to get trained, in a natural system.
Right. Because, and I've mentioned this on my podcast before, and I'm sure that you guys have probably talked about it too, but like the doctor thinks they're doing the right thing for you. Like, this is what they've been trained to do. It's just a lack of knowledge and education. It's not because they want to prescribe the pill to you and want all of the negative side effects to happen to you. They probably became a doctor because they want to help people and they think they're helping you. So it really does take a little bit of bravery in the doctor's office. And I think that's something that just culturally, we're not really taught to advocate for ourselves when we're sitting in that doctor's office. And it can be scary because we don't always go to some people regularly go to the doctor, but like, if you're just sort of like normal person living your life, like maybe 2 times a year, like, and so like max probably maybe once a year, maybe not even in the past 5 years. And so it can be, disheartening to kind of sit there in a weird robe and somebody just like touched your boobs because they're going to like make sure that you don't have any lumps, which is good. And you're kind of like, oh, well, I don't really want to talk about like these intimate details. And I don't really want to like get her off her game and all of that. But we need to do that. We need to step up. We need to advocate for ourselves. We need to be brave in the doctor's office, and we need to know what we know. We need to respect our bodies and say, I know that this is not something I want. I know that the pill isn't something I want, and I need better healthcare than that.
Yeah. Well, and the first step is always that what we can do as women doesn't take a prescription. It doesn't take a degree. It just takes us finding the right resources to learn our own body. And so, the starting point is we're all passionate about women learning how to track their own fertility signs, because that's where the empowerment starts. Because if you yourself understand what's going on and you can tie your own irregularities to your body, and you can put all the pieces together yourself and how your body's working and how it's not working right, then you're already armed, to go into the doctor's office and say, listen, I know what's going on. I know I'm not depressed. I know that these things are happening at certain times in my cycle. And I really want to explore what the underlying root cause of this is. And please help me with that. I don't want to take just a medicine to Band-Aid over the top. So I know you mentioned, Ellen, that you're a charting instructor. What method are you teaching, or if you are still teaching, and kind of where's your education in that?
Yeah. So I teach the symptothermal method through SymptoPro. So, and one of the things that I talk about, especially when like a very common instance when the question comes up of like, what kind of birth control do you want, is postpartum. And so the thing that I really propose to women when that question comes up is instead of saying, oh, well, like no, I don't want that. Like I chart my cycle, or like, no, I don't want that. I use NFP. Like, be specific. No, thank you. I don't want the pill or a hormonal contraceptive, because I use the symptothermal method to track my cycle and plan my family, and just really like showing that you're not just like willy-nilly doing this because that's what the doctor kind of thinks you're doing when you say, oh, I use NFP. Oh, I chart my cycle. It's like, oh, well, then I'll see you back here in 6 months,
Yeah. Something I think a lot of listeners and people just in general wonder is, they're maybe listening to this and they're convicted and they're like, yeah, I mean, this makes sense. I get it. I mean, I understand why putting something synthetic in my body that's super potent would be harmful, and how it would interrupt the symphony of hormones that affect basically every function in my body. Like, I think that we do a good job convincing women of that or showing that. But I think that something that always comes up time and time again is this thought of, well, what about my husband though? If I'm going to practice a natural system, that would mean, and if we're avoiding pregnancy, that would mean that there'd be a time of fertility in my cycle where my husband and we do not have sex with each other to avoid pregnancy. We're figuring that out. But my husband is not like that. He's not going to be open to that. He's not whatever. Or maybe you yourself, you're like, no, because that's when I feel like I want to have sex the most, is when I'm during that, but of course, if we're not ovulating on the pill, we don't really have that feeling anyway. You know what I'm saying? So I want to kind of dig into this one a little bit. What do we tell women? What can we tell women who have that hesitation? This all seems convincing, but it's not realistic for me. Or this all seems convincing, but my daughter, she's 18 or she's 20, she's in college, she's on the pill, she's not going to do that. So let's kind of open that up. That one's a tricky one, but I know it's what like a lot of people are thinking right now.
Yes. Oh, it's honestly the biggest stumbling block for using fertility awareness, because we're literally asking one of the hardest things for a woman to do when you want it most. Don't have sex.
Or if you do, just know that pregnancy may occur. And that's what I think is important. And it's actually why I brought this up is, we think about the root cause a lot. What's the root cause of my, medical issue in which I'm being prescribed the pill for? What's the root cause of that? Which is a great question to ask. Whenever I get that question from anybody, like, okay, well, my husband though, or, I'm not married and I don't want kids right now, I think, well, what's the root of that? Like, how can we address whatever's going on, that insecurity, before the pill conversation even begins? Mm-hmm. So it takes me back to a time where our local hospital, it's a Catholic hospital, and it's great because they have just I think a couple years ago, they no longer are prescribing contraception, unless for various reasons, which that's a whole other conversation. But this question a lot of the doctors had was, well, what about the woman who's being raped by her husband? What about the woman who's being used as an object and she's going to get pregnant? So it's a double duo, like used and now she's pregnant with this baby she doesn't want. So this was a question that kept coming up. But the answer is this. We need to get that woman help. Like, we need to remove her from the situation. By continually giving this woman the pill, we are exacerbating, or however you say that word, this issue. We need to get to the root of what's causing that. It's very hard and it's a challenge big time. But I do think that while there's also, we know medically there's root causes, there's also root causes in terms of like our mental health, our emotional health, our relationships that really should be the focus of those questions, I think.
So right. And like, I think if you go back to like the question of like, well, I don't think my husband's on board. Okay, well, why? Do you know why? Like, have you talked to your husband about it? And really like diving into those conversations. My 18-year-old, no, she's just not going to do that. Well, have you really talked to her about it? Have you had that really hard conversation? Yeah, these aren't like super easy, 5-minute conversations.
I mean, don't you think it's that if it were the husband, I mean, again, he may not know anything about women's fertility. So there may be a lack of understanding of really how long the fertile window is and how long a couple needs to abstain. There is a lot that goes into kind of the understanding of it. And to Jamie's point too, no woman wants to be used. And so we really, as women, need to ask ourselves in our relationship with our spouses, that is the act that we're, coming together in, is it something where we're feeling used or something where we're coming together and feeling loved? Because love is where you will the good of someone else completely. And there's just a lot of situations with sex where that doesn't happen. We know that it's a broken thing a lot of times, not a complete and whole thing. But the goal for all of us is to feel that wholeness, that love that really unites us together fully. And that's what we know, that in a respectful kind of relationship like this, when both the man and the woman are expecting the fertility cycle, that the relationship is growing in love, in a sense, because there's a respect for the human body, there's a respect for its natural design, but there's a respect for the human person in that just sometimes cannot occur when you completely try to ignore the fact that the human body is designed this way. And even in the situation of the woman being used significantly, being raped, the pill will eventually fail that woman. So it's never something you can guarantee also that, oh, well, if you just do this, then you'll never get hurt. Well, we know that's not true. That's why 50% of women who were on a contraceptive do end up in an unplanned pregnancy, because they don't work, especially in situations where things are already broken to begin with. So then we've just set them up for even an equally kind of tragic situation when they think they did the right thing and then it failed against them as well.
Totally.
Right. Well, and I think just like stepping back even further, like culturally, we've created sex into just being like this recreational thing, but like it's to make babies. Like it is. And so I think we need to understand that as a culture, that like this is not just a source of pleasure. Yes, sex is pleasurable. It's designed to be that way, but it's also designed to make babies. And so like the reason you're abstaining is because no, we don't want a child right now for one reason or another. And so we understand that we need to not have sex right now because like that's kind of one of the major points of sex is to make a child. And, I think that's like something that's really missing in sex education. We could talk about sex education all day. But like just really understanding, like, it's not a recreational thing. It's a real serious thing that like, and no, we don't need to yell at someone like in Mean Girls, like, if you have sex, then you will get pregnant and die. That's not necessarily true. But like there's just this disconnect of one of the primary functions of sex, like in our society. And there's like a confusion Like when a woman gets pregnant, it's like, I don't know how I got pregnant. Well, guess what? You had sex. And so therefore, like that created a baby. That's how it works.
And I think too, like, and I totally understand this, because with sex, there's bonding and there's cortisol release and there's, wait, is that right? Cortisol?
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin.
Stress. No. Well, maybe in some cases stressful.
It's really good.
Well,
I think you're thinking oxytocin. Yeah.
It is what I'm thinking. Exactly. Anyway, oxytocin. So that bonding is happening. And so, you know, it makes sense. It does. It makes sense that the earliest we engage in sexual activity, especially as women, that the more likely we are going to feel more bonded to those we have sex with. And if we don't know any other way to express love or emotion, that is exactly how we're going to feel like we need to. But while that's the case, and while our body was made for bonding in that way, which is why it happens, it's unfortunate, and something that I think our job as, you know, women in our 30s, 40s and beyond, to really educate young women to say, okay, listen, here's the deal though. If you want to get married someday, like, sex can't be the only way you bond with your husband. You can't, because 98%, 99.5% of your time is going to be spent in your life not having sex. And so how are you going to bond with your husband? How are you going to grow your relationship? You're not having sex. So you need practice. You need practice, like, for your future self and for your future marriage. How are you going to bond without that? So in a sense, I think that's what happens. It's why sex and this issue of we're separating sex from baby is because of that bonding, which is one of the two things that sex does bring. So it's, yeah, like you're saying, Ellen, it's like bringing that baby reality back into the picture, but also empowering our young girls. Like, there are more ways than sex to be intimate with one another. You know, there's emotional and there's communicative and there's spiritual ways to be intimate with one another, and giving women that permission, in a sense, and educating the man and, you know, the boyfriend or whatever for that too.
Right. And that's what that sister Hannah Klaus, you know, a teen star, that program, it's what she really found in young women, particularly, that if a woman is connected to her biological realities, like the function of her fertility cycle and the ability for it to procreate, like, she's much more likely to respect it. You know, if you don't understand, I mean, you just don't understand why you shouldn't engage in something like this, that where it can be really negative to bond in that way when you're not prepared for a child, right? But the education is key, and it's the lack of what we give people in sex education that it doesn't form that, you know, self-awareness, that interconnectedness with our own fertility. And so we just don't have that deep respect for it then. And she proved in her studies, even with high-risk youth, that, you know, that women would step away, because no woman wants to be used.
Right.
But once she's in a situation of being used, because of what you said, Jamie, because the bonding hormone is so strong, it's a lot of times even more difficult for a woman to get out of a relationship that she doesn't want to even be in, because she's now bonded herself in a chemical way so significantly to another human being that she really struggles to disconnect from that, even though she may feel it's toxic and she knows she's being used. This is the design of the natural law, so that when a couple came together in intercourse and made a child, they would stay with that child. These are not just, oh, I chose something or not chose something. These are strong kind of evolutionary human natural lawness things that make it so that people care for their children, that societies function and flourish as normal societies. And so we have to respect that. We also have to understand why then it gets totally messed up. And you could say, like, right now, there is a really big problem in our culture with understanding what the building blocks of our culture should be when it relates to marriage, family, sex, the whole picture.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. I what you're saying is ringing true so much. As you know, I have a daughter who's 8, but she's not going to be 8 forever. I'm just so thankful, again, that there are women like us and others who really are going to start pouring into our young girls. And maybe as you're listening, you're a mother of a young girl in college, or you're like, well, my daughter is past her formation years in terms of how you can help them. The great thing is this. So podcasts exist, which is great. And planting seeds are wonderful. And even though you may think as a parent, maybe for your college daughter or high school daughter, that they won't listen to this podcast or other resources you share, I just have a feeling they might. Especially if this daughter of yours, again, I'm speaking to the parents, struggle with other things hormone related or mood swings, or you can tell like, that maybe she's in an unhealthy relationship. I just have a feeling that maybe if you just share this information with your daughters, that they might listen when it's the right time. So I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Yeah, definitely. It never hurts to share information. It never hurts to reach out. And it's never too late to like change. It's never too late to stop using the pill. Like, it's never too late for any of those things.
It's funny is we started this episode with like, why do we prescribe the pill for every single thing? And then like, it didn't end up that way, but I actually really liked the way this one went, because it's probably what needed to be discussed in terms of that. But I guess kind of bringing it back to that main anchor point of, prescribing one thing for all of it. Let's like kind of bring that one thing home. And we can relate it to what we just talked about too, about, just relationships and that kind of thing. So what do we want to leave our listeners taking back with them, in regards to the pill being prescribed for everything, but then also how there's a better way when we can understand our body?
Well, I think you said it, Jamie, at the very beginning before we started recording, is that you, or maybe it was you, Ellen, just the stop and think. Stop and think first. And I think this is kind of the step sometimes because of the way we are in medicine and under like believing that the doctor just wants what's best for us and he knows what's best or she knows what's best. We don't stop and think. Mm-hmm. And so we want to think about, okay, what is this medicine actually going to do for me? Does it just, Band-Aid over the symptom, or is it actually going to fix my problem? What is my problem? Do I actually know what the problem is to begin with? Because if the doctor said, oh yeah, well, I get you have all that, and they never told you what the problem was, but gave you just a treatment for it. Stop and think. Did I get a diagnosis first? Did I understand why I have that diagnosis? Because so many times in women's health, we don't actually get that information before we're offered this medication. Stop and think. Does this medication have side effects? Did I ask about the side effects? What are the severe side effects of this medication? What are the short-term side effects of the medication? What are the long-term side effects of this medication? Did I ask those questions? Stop and think, and then ask yourself, did I know how my body works to begin with? Can I connect my symptoms to my cycle? If I can't, if I don't even know what cervical mucus is or what the point of cervical mucus is, I've got a problem with my connection to my own body, which we have to believe that it's our own bodies that we should care about most. No one else lives in our body. Your doctor doesn't live in your body. It's you who has to care for your own body your whole life. So you have the most skin in the game when it comes to it. Stop and think whether or not you really deserve, this type of care or an alternative type of care. And then know that you have the resources out there to help you. Are they everywhere? No. And I'm sorry about that. They're a lot harder to find, but more and more there are people who want to help you in an alternative way to give you a diagnosis and an alternative to just suppressive medications. So if you don't know of who to, reach out to, start with us in these 2 podcasts and we will guide you further because there are people that can help you. So that would be how I would approach it.
Totally.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I wanted to mention before we ended is like, as I was preparing for this episode, I literally Google searched, why is the pill prescribed for everything? And what I found was all of these websites just toting the magical miracleness of the pill. Like literally just like, oh, it's this like great thing that it works for everything. And if you stop and think, like that doesn't make sense that there exists this magical miracle pill that fixes everything. And, we know that it doesn't fix anything. and it in fact breaks down or pauses or stops really important things. But just, that stop and think, just do that.
Yeah. And it's not a judgment on anyone on the pill too, just so we're not trying to be like, oh, it's so bad if you're on the pill. And because again, it legitimately can help a lot of people's symptoms. And we understand that. But what we want women to know first and foremost, that it's your choice. So if you choose to be on it, that's certainly, it's your body, it's your choice to be able to do that. But most women don't know there's an alternative. And that's the key thing here, is that we want them to understand there is an alternative choice if they wanted it. And it may be healthier for them and it may give them more answers. So
yeah. And most women will choose a natural system when given the option. Most women. And I, if I can find it, listeners, I will post it. But I did actually research on this, so I know for sure. There's an actual research article. And again, I'm going to try my best to find it, where it was asked if a natural system was given to you at the doctor, would you have thought about it? Would you have entertained it? Would you have considered it? And most women, I think it's like 85%. Said, yeah, it's because it's never given to them as an option. Yeah. So anyway, thank you, Ellen and Theresa, for spending time with me today. And we hope and pray that our listeners really were able to pull out some nuggets that they can just think on and share with their friends, that they stop and ask themselves, okay, why is the pill being offered to me, every single time I have an issue? And don't be afraid to ask your doctor. Why is this what you're offering me? How will this help my problem? And then ask too for further resources to learn more about the cycle. If they don't know, again, like Theresa said, reach out to one of us, Ellen, or myself, Theresa, and we can get you connected to somebody who can help you with your cycle. So, all right. Well, thanks, ladies, for spending time with me. Thanks, listeners. Be sure to share this and have a great day.
Thanks so much for listening. If you're interested in learning more about the Hormone Genius podcast, I put a link to their website in the show notes so you can check out their podcast as well. And if you're not already following Charting Toward Intimacy on Instagram, go ahead and find us at Charting Toward Intimacy. And you can also reach out with questions, comments, or episode suggestions. Until next time.